Okay. Um, well, let's get going, and then other people can catch up as we go. Hopefully, you can already see my slides. So, by way of introduction, thank you for coming to the November tea break, where in preparation of the season that will not be named at this time of year, quite, um, we thought we'd talk about gifts and gifts of vouchers and memberships in particular, which we thought might be practically quite helpful. My name is Oliver Mantell. I'm the Director of Evidence and Insight at the Audience Agency. And having just adjusted my monitor, I realise I'm wearing a particularly luminous white t-shirt. But otherwise, I'm a blonde-haired-ish at this time of year, white male, middle-aged-ish. And I'm joined by my colleague Megan, who's doing the kind of other thoughts and feedback. So Megan, if you want to say a little bit of a hello and an audio description, and we will get underway.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. My name is Megan, Campaigns Manager for the Audience Agency. I'm a white woman, shoulder length, dark brown hair. It does look like I'm sat in some sort of padded cell right now, if anyone's concerned. I'm actually in a co-working space that has these little sort of pods to speak in. It's a little bit surreal, but I promise you I'm not actually in a padded cell. But yeah, looking forward to having a chat later in the session.
Thank you very much. So yes, hopefully everyone's got your cup of tea or other drink handy. And we will crack on. So we're going to be talking today based on findings from the Cultural Participation Monitor, which regular tea breakers will know is our nationally representative population survey. This one is taken from wave 11, which was in September, with a sample of about 2,500 people. So if the slide will advance, we will even talk about things that are not the title. There we are. And so we'll be talking particularly about people gifting or being gifted vouchers and memberships, how many people do it, what they think of it, and some of the attitudes around it and how it varies by different types of people. This is, of course, an enormous topic and not one that we can by any means hope to exhaust in the space of 45 minutes. But hopefully some of what we say will be a useful kind of prompt, provocation, and set up for you to share your thoughts and experiences, which no doubt will be very illuminating. So to start off with, we asked people, have you either given or separate question, have you received a membership to a cultural organisation, heritage site or visitor attraction, or a voucher to a cultural organisation, heritage site or visitor attraction in the last 5 years? And we also asked, have you given cash or received cash? Just as a way of getting a bit of a comparison. And what we saw was, broadly speaking, those kind of double in popularity as you go up the scale. So a bit under 1 in 5 people said that they'd been given a membership to one of those types of organisations. About double that said, about a third said they'd had a voucher, been given a voucher for one of those, and just over 2/3 people said that they had been given cash. So perhaps unsurprisingly, given the sort of relative, the technical term is fungibility, but the flexibility of use of each of those things, not surprising maybe that it goes up step by step. But still, we're still talking about relatively large numbers of people who are in the kind of broad market in general. We didn't separate out those different 3 types of organisation. So it could be someone being gifted a National Trust membership, it could be a theatre membership, it could be an Alton Towers membership. But that could hopefully give us some kind of broad indication. So we did see which type of people is sort of relatively more or less likely to do that. Generally speaking, families came out higher. People who are feeling better off than they used to be come out higher as well. And people who are both of those came out really high. So if you find families who are feeling relatively flush, they're definitely in the market to receive, and as we'll see in a sec, be given these kinds of things. There's also a bit of a skew towards being London-based, metrocultural, having higher educational attainments. That's the MA, so it's MA or anything above for highest education. And cash is much more universal. It's much flatter profile, but again, a bit of skew towards families, those who are feeling better off, and those who are both. And pretty much it's the same picture for people that have received them, which I'm not sure what's obvious or not. Is what I mean. So when I first looked at it, I thought, well, you would have thought there's people that give various types of things, people that receive them, and there might be a kind of standard transfer, so to say, for older relatives giving them to younger relatives, so those profiles would be quite different. Broadly speaking, that doesn't seem to be the case, that these groups seem to be pretty much the same types of people, and indeed, as we'll see in a second, pretty much the same people. So it's more that there's kind of mutual gift giving of these types of things amongst a cohort of people with things in common, as opposed to it being a kind of transfer from one group to another. So again, very similar picture, very similar percentages, tendency to be better off families, both, etc. The one difference, or the notable difference really is around who's given, who receives cash. So the people that receive cash are more likely to be younger and to a certain extent more likely to be women. And it's a relatively slightly smaller group of people overall. So there's a bit more of a sense of a broader pool of people are funneling it to a narrower pool of people, but it's marginal. So it's probably not super important. But by and large, it's very much equivalent people. And in fact, getting on for 3/4 of these groups are the same, literally the same people. So we'll get into this in more detail in a sec, but broadly speaking, we asked people, do you think these are a good present? And to make that a bit more concrete, we picked two specific examples. So we said, would a membership of a heritage organisation be a good present? Or to what extent do you agree that that would be a good present? And to what extent do you agree that a voucher for a visitor attraction would be a good present? So it's a bit more specific. We've not picked all of the options because there just wasn't space, but most people are saying yes. And we'll see in a sec which people say yes most strongly. That goes up a little bit if people have been to arts and culture or arts and heritage recently. Similar amount for both of those, so it's not so much that it's arts and heritage rather than visitor attractions. It's just people that tend to be out and about doing things tend to think, yeah, okay, they're slightly more likely to say it's a good present, but not radically, actually, considering. So that's the good news. The flip side of that, though, is that when we ask people, given the choice, would you rather have cash or one of these types of present? Most people said, show me the money, basically, or words to that effect. 23% of people strongly agreeing. And I will potentially later on post a link to a quite an entertaining little article by Tim Harford, the undercover economist, who basically says Christmas is a terrible waste because people keep giving presents that aren't worth as much cash as they spend on. Just give cash. I'm simplifying slightly. But so there is something in that, but only something. And the difference is, it depends really on how well targeted the gift is, as we'll see. So we asked people, are you more likely or less likely to give these as gifts than you were 5 years ago? And the figure in the top right-hand corner might be obscured, but essentially memberships, it's marginally the case that people are saying they're less likely to give them than they were 5 years ago. It's 21% compared to 24% less likely. But vouchers, it's considerably more likely than it was. So 39% more likely, only 15% less likely. So there's a skew towards people saying, yes, we're more likely to give vouchers than we were. Membership sliding, if anything. And in both cases, it's families, it's people who are better off, it's people who are both of those, and it's people who are younger, although vouchers, it's more like under 45s. Memberships, it's a slightly narrower range, who are particularly more likely to be giving those now than they used to be. We'll see in a sec that some of the groups who are less likely to give these things, some of the groups who are more likely to give these things are quite young, and that's partly because I think, if you're 16 now, then 5 years ago you were 11, you probably weren't spending money on presents at 16. So that's just age. And down there in the bottom corner is a sense of some of the overlap between the people who've given and received these different types of things. So getting on for 3/4 of people who had given vouchers in the last 5 years had received them. And it's a bit lower than that for memberships because fewer people get and receive memberships, but it's still very high compared to those percentages there. There does seem to be quite a lot of sort of in-category loyalty, and people who give memberships, give vouchers, get vouchers, as opposed to just people who are in this market tend to do more of both. But yeah, that seems to be the impression is there's quite a lot of overlap. It's the same people, which might have implications for who you think might buy gift vouchers for people. Could well be the people that those have been bought for in the first place. That's an overview. Is another way of seeing what's largely very similar information. So this is just looking at the people who say that they're more likely to buy vouchers. The sort of the weighted average score of people saying is they're more likely or less likely to buy vouchers or to buy memberships. And the two are pretty correlated. People who are more likely, or categories of people who are more likely to do one of them are also more likely to do the other. So there's a pretty much straight line relationship that goes up like that. But within that, there are some differences. So yes, we have a whole bunch of people who are grouped at the top who are more likely to do both. And we've seen they tend to be families with children up to 5 or age 6 to 10. The sort of very youngest groups, for reasons just mentioned, people, senior managers, and way out on their own as a sort of hot prospect are families who are feeling better off than they previously have been. So again, zoom in on those people. People who say they're doing it less, and indeed this matches pretty much people who say they do it less, not just are doing it less than 5 years ago, tend to be much sort of older groups, particularly. But where there's an interesting split, I think, is where there's more of a skew towards memberships or more of a skew towards vouchers. And the skew towards memberships is largely higher engaged segments, so metroculturals, cultural experience seekers in audience spectrum terms. More details available on our website, and someone may post a link any second. And also towards sort of higher professionals, people based in London, higher educational attainment. On the flip side of that, people who are relatively likely to have shifted towards giving vouchers, but not memberships, it tends to be people in sort of clerical or semi-routine jobs, people who are feeling worse off financially, some of these younger groups, and people who don't work from home. So generally speaking, it's people who are maybe a little bit less affluent. There's a bit of a skew towards vouchers rather than memberships. So essentially, that's a repackaging of the same broad picture. Where, to my mind at least, I think it gets more intriguing is when we get into what people think about these things. So I'm just going to run you through two charts that illustrate that. So we asked people, so this is the same question that we worked out a little sort of summary score for previously. This is saying, to what extent do you agree that you'd rather receive cash, or you think heritage organisation membership is a good present, or a gift voucher is a good present? So you can see lots of green bars. Most people are, broadly speaking, in favour of all of those, but there are some differences. So those who would rather receive cash skew towards younger and lower engaged and lower income groups, perhaps unsurprisingly. So if you've got an elderly relative who's thinking of their sort of young, impoverished grandchild or whatever, they're probably the groups that would rather just be sent cash. So kaleidoscope creativity, frontline families, particularly high, under 24s, and those who are unemployed or who are students. Actually, both of those results are so similar, I put them together. So that's who is most keen on receiving cash. And obviously, you can see that's quite heavily skewed compared to the base figures. So obviously, everyone else is a little bit more even. But almost no one said they would rather receive a voucher membership than cash. I think it was something like families that are over 65 and families that are engaging in the arts more than they used to be are marginally more likely, but everyone else was some variation of negative. Anyway, membership for heritage organisation, perhaps unsurprisingly, community land culture bus, have a relatively, more sort of highly engaged, but with a more kind of traditional tinge there in consumption. They're relatively high. People based in London, interestingly, are quite high. And again, big skew towards people with children. So families really kind of like that kind of option. And again, the educational attainment thing coming through. Whereas visitor attractions, it's a slightly different profile of people who are more engaged, so more inclined to think it's a good present. So yes, there's families, but they tend to be a little bit younger on average. Trips and treats is a kind of middling age segment, kind of middle Britain segment, with relatively likely to have children. It's quite high for them. And kaleidoscope creativity. So again, one of these. Actually, interestingly, one of the groups who they'd rather receive cash than these memberships, they still think these are a really good present. It's just that cash is even better. But yeah, it's been interesting that they're in both of those. So we can see there's certain people who are relatively more likely to want different ones of these offers. Obviously, all the other different combinations of, a gift voucher to a theatre or a membership to a visitor attraction or whatever, all these different other combinations may have different profiles of people that would skew towards them, but we couldn't explore every single option. But worth considering for your organisation how that picture might vary, or indeed to ask an equivalent question and find out directly. So, other little bit of where the attitudes are varying. So we asked a couple of general things about the idea of what kind of stuff do you like to have as gifts? Do you prefer gifts that are experiences than objects? We know that's quite a kind of coming trend in terms of what people are talking about with gift giving. And are experiences more memorable than receiving gifts of objects? And okay, strong response in favour of both, particularly the latter. But in terms of who's saying it, preference for experiences is particularly, and we're delighted to hear this given the segment name, experience seekers. So they really stick out. So the younger, often highly educated edges of cities groups, which fits the education, it fits with the age profile there. A bunch of them also have families, and families in general seem to be valuing experiences rather than objects. So yeah, there's a broad picture there. It's pretty similar in terms of the wider thing about it being more memorable. Interestingly, Londoners also seem to think that experiences are sort of where it's at. Whether that's about storage space or not, I don't know, but it's a factor. So one thing we did wonder about is not just whether people liked the idea of getting a voucher or membership, but did they actually think they would use it? Because clearly, if you spend money on a membership and someone doesn't use it, that will be a bit of a problem. And we've got here over a third of people agreeing there's a good chance they wouldn't use a gift to a voucher or membership. So that's quite a lot. I mean, that's quite a lot of kind of lost value, if you like. And obviously that will depend on how well targeted the present is. So whether someone really knows you're in for a certain thing but don't have a membership, or would actually, if there's a convenient place to use the voucher, whatever. But that does suggest there's really quite big potential shortfall. And again, in terms of the people who are most likely to say that they wouldn't use it, frontline families. So I think that's quite interesting, because they are relatively lower income, and what this maybe is implying is that there's a whole load of other costs that are wrapped up with using vouchers and using memberships. So even if you're given one for free, actually it isn't really entirely free, and that's a bit of a barrier and a bit of a challenge. And also just when people are busy and pressured, which frontline families think often are, it makes it harder to do other things, which is to be expected. Similarly for younger groups, but also people based in urban conurbations, so sort of big urban areas, that might be a convenience thing as well, about how easy is it to get out to wherever this other place is, or how much else is there going on as competition. So I guess that also informs the targeting in terms of who it would be a good idea to give one of these to. And of course, there are a couple of groups who, in whatever way, face different barriers to engagement. So they're less likely to use all these things because it may be less convenient, it may be less easy, there may be particular practical barriers, which could be around disability. It could be around other reasons why they've not engaged in arts and heritage in the last 12 months. So, I mean, in some ways, that's less surprising, really, particularly the last of those. So, if that gives us a broad view about what people are saying about who's doing them, how many people are doing these things, what they think of them, whether they like them, whether they think they're sort of valuable, whether they like experiences. It seems to me that there's obviously clearly a strong and growing market here. There are lots of opportunities, particularly targeted based on what particular different groups want. Whilst, yes, there is this kind of cascade of cash to vouchers to memberships, broadly speaking, it seems to be, in terms of how narrow the kind of range of people that are doing them or potentially would prefer them, the more targeted it is, the less that is the case. And these things are still seen as being good presents. So I think we can kind of market them confidently as things that people will want, and that we can, endorse that people tend to want them, particularly where there's a clear targeting. And experiences in general are, as we might hope, really being seen as being good presents and good experiences, particularly by families, better educated professionals, and people who are younger, with the caveat that the youngest are most likely not to redeem them. In fact, there's a bit of a U shape, so the very youngest and the very oldest are least likely to redeem them. But that does suggest that the sweet spot in terms of targeting is probably 25 to 44 in terms of people who want them and will redeem them. So that gives us a bit of a target group. So we can definitely promote them. We can see that lots of people want them and which people want particular types of things. It looks like gifting memberships sort of comes down the track from gifting vouchers. That's kind of a wider part of the funnel. And that there's a relationship between people who are given these things and who then give them themselves. And it's a bit of a kind of pool of people. So if you can encourage people into that pool one way or the other, they're likely to kind of circulate within it, I think. I think there's something interesting about that potential, 1 in 3 people saying, actually, there's a good chance I wouldn't take this up. Think about how to manage that, how to avoid it or compensate for it, or even in some ways take advantage of it. Think, well, actually, we could offer discounts knowing that the value we get back is going to be the value of what we're selling them for, because not all of them will be sold, will be used. So I think there's some interesting questions and opportunities in that particular area. But for the time being, I'm going to pass over to Megan, I think. Yes, I am. And then we can say a little bit in a sec about what you might practically do in relation to as well.
Great. Thanks, Ollie. Hi, everyone. For those who came in late, hello, Megan, Campaigns Manager for the Audience Agency. In a past life, I was a marketing manager for venues, so I kind of know the world that a lot of the folks are operating in. And yeah, it's just really interesting hearing this sort of insight and thinking back to the days I worked in a cultural organisation and how I would use that if I was still kind of in that role, I suppose is where my thinking's been going, sort of listening to that research. I think something that's really struck me is that certainly, and you might be far more sophisticated about this than I was at the time, but I was labouring under a little bit of a misapprehension back when I was working in venues, that things like gift cards and memberships, the market for that was these kind of last minute panic buyers. These people who didn't really know what else to do. It had got to December the 23rd and they were thinking, oh my goodness, panic, what do I get my mother-in-law or whoever? So all of our marketing activity that we were doing for gift vouchers and memberships was pretty much targeted at those people. It was late. The message was what to get the person who's got everything, or if you haven't got organised with your shopping yet, this is something you can do. And I think that is really important. We did have a lot of sales that would come in on the 23rd and 24th of December, but I think what all of this kind of research is suggesting is that there's actually a much bigger opportunity here to get in a bit earlier with people who are thoughtful gifters and who really would value both giving and receiving a gift voucher or membership. That was kind of the big light bulb moment for me a little bit, seeing this. I did a little bit of a dig into, just for my own interest really, might be worth sharing, into sort of market for gift cards, gift vouchers generally, just in the kind of wider consumer world. And it's true, it is growing. It's a really, really large market that is expanding, particularly since COVID. I think there's probably all sorts of reasons for that. And particularly as well, I found local so sort of those sort of gift cards that you can only spend on your local high street, for example, are proving really, really popular. I think that's tapping into a lot of people wanting to spend locally or wanting to stay local, wanting to support local businesses. And the other thing that really struck me as well was looking at that is that there's this idea that gift cards encourage overspending sometimes as well, and vouchers. The stat that I found, which I think is amazing actually, is in the UK, a third of people who have a gift voucher spend 100 to 125% more than the value of that gift card when they redeem it. So you might be giving them a £50 voucher, but they're actually spending £100 or even £150. So it just really struck me that, gosh, there's some really amazing opportunities here, and perhaps we as a cohort of marketers can be a little bit clever about how we tap into that, maybe, or just develop the way we tap into that. So yeah, I think we've really got to think beyond those disorganized last minute panic bookers, and think about those. It's obvious from the data that Ollie was presenting there that the key purchasers of gift cards and memberships are people who are general high engaged arts attenders, and we've got lots of those in our databases, we hope so anyway. So when we're thinking about marketing those experiences, how are we tapping into what we know about them and their motivations, and do you have the means to communicate with them in the appropriate way, really? So thinking about, I was thinking maybe you could tap into, say you are promoting a gift voucher, rather than just saying great last minute gift option for somebody, but can we think about how to tap into the person's motivations there, which are about, they love arts and culture and heritage, they've had an amazing experience when they've come to your organisation and they want to share that with someone. So maybe there's something we can do with the language and the imagery that we're using there, that it's about sharing an experience or passing on your love of something to somebody else, rather than simply ticking a box because you forgot to get a present for your mother-in-law. You know, perhaps there is something a little bit more emotive that we could tap into when we're talking about that. Also, I read something as well that personalization's really important with this. There might be a little bit of a perception that a voucher or membership is a slightly impersonal gift. It's not the beautiful item wrapped up with a bow that you've given someone. But so could we bring some element of personalization into that gift card? Is there the option to include a personal message or to include a personalized card or whatever it is? You know, what could we do to sort of bring it closer in line with sort of traditional gift giving? I think memberships are possibly a little bit more complex. There's clearly a kind of progression there, isn't there, between people who, you know, the sort of cash gift versus the gift voucher gift versus the membership gift. And the people who are looking to purchase a membership or receive a membership are pretty high engaged already, probably, and they really want to take that next step. So I think there's probably some thinking about what does your own organisation's membership scheme look like? There's so much variety. I've seen some that are based on discounts, 2-for-1 membership, that sort of thing, or priority booking membership, or but there's also schemes that are based more around patronage and donations and becoming a friend or tapping into additional experiences. There's all sorts of different things and going on within membership schemes. So I guess it's about working out if your membership offer aligns with what we're seeing the values are of those people that are warmest to buying those memberships. You know, they are the high culturally engaged, they're particular age groups. You know, do the two things marry up, basically? So is there any tweaking that we need to do with the offer to kind of match them up and make sure they're kind of really landing with the right people? And if it is, great, then we get them out to those kind of core bookers and we build that relationship from there. And something else I thought as well, that there's a sort of almost like a sort of slightly circular relationship here, that you've got the relationship with the person who purchases the membership, and you've got the relationship with the person who redeems the membership and uses the membership. And perhaps there's some thinking about, how do we keep that relationship going? How do you make sure you've got a relationship not just with the person who purchased, but with the person who redeems it and uses it going forwards beyond that year-long membership or whatever? But also remembering that the person who purchased it is likely, we saw from the data earlier, to have been gifted one in the past as well. They're more likely to have been gifted one in the past. So there's quite a lot of kind of circularity there, and they're not kind of distinct groups of people as well. So yeah, I think memberships are possibly not necessarily more complex, but just making sure that the offer of the membership is really speaking to those values that we're seeing in those people that are most likely to buy them. Really, it probably feels quite important. On a very practical note, if I was thinking about campaigns and when to get stuff out, I think there's the phrase that's going through my head is, you know, a gift voucher's not just for Christmas. It's something you could feasibly use and have year-round campaigns. I think, given how we see there's this kind of warmth towards giving and receiving vouchers, people aren't seeing them as a rubbish gift; they're seeing them as a really good gift. And people have occasions all year round to give gifts, so perhaps it is something to just take beyond the festive season peak into the sort of year-round marketing that you're doing as well. But that said, there are still those last minute 23rd of December panic buyers who we can tap into as well, and let's not forget about them. They are still probably useful as well. I'd want to have a think maybe about looking at this segmenting my mailing list potentially, on the understanding that the most likely people to buy either a gift voucher or a membership are people who I've already got a relationship with and who already got quite good positive associations with my organisation. They've had a good time. They want to share that experience with other people. So my kind of core market is going to be my core bookers, my core mailing list. Probably want to have a look at a bit of a segmentation exercise of those, and whether that's segmenting by audience spectrum or by age or by location, whatever it is, and then looking back at some of those earlier stats that Ollie presented about who the warmest groups are and saying, right, how much of my audience is in each of these buckets? What's my market look like? Have I got a big market there of those people in those particular segments who we know like this sort of stuff? Is it worth me doing? And I think the likelihood is, looking at it, you're probably going to have quite a lot of people there, but it's still worth going through the exercise to work that out. And then, as you would with any other campaign, like, okay, we've identified that you've got a big group of commuter land culture buffs within your audience. So we know they're keen culture attenders. We know they're prime market for this sort of campaign. How are you going to speak to them? How are you going to package up the offer for them in the right way? Again, community and culture buffs, we know they're very keen on being sort of rooted in their local community, and they've got a keen sense of community in their local area. So can you speak to that in some way with the offer that you're doing? That's a motivating factor for them. And as a sort of final, maybe just treat this like any other marketing campaign. You know, I have been guilty, and I will absolutely hold my hands up to saying I've looked at gift vouchers and memberships as an add-on and a slight, oh yes, we do that. We should pop that on our Christmas marketing. We should make sure people know that. But it feels to me that there's a really serious opportunity here to treat this like any other product, any other event, any other exhibition, show, whatever it is that you're doing. And therefore do some careful testing of things, you know, do some thoughtful evaluation and monitoring, and see how those campaigns go, and see what you can learn and test and sort of iterate for future campaigns as you work through. Really, it just feels like there's an opportunity there to really tap into something that is growing, and we have, you know, as a cultural sector, we've got a fantastic offer for people. We really do. We've got something that the vast majority, you know, a lot of people are very warm towards, and they want to share, and they want to invite other people to share that experience with them, and this could be a way of doing it, really. So yeah, I think, if we know, without getting too much into a plug for the audience agency, what we do, if we can help with segmenting your lists and looking at what proportion of your bookers are commuter land culture buffs, we can do that for you, and we can help you with that. But you may want to do it in another way that makes sense to you in the context of your organisation. But we can still help you through that process a little bit as well. So, or even if you just want to like have a chat with us about some ideas you've got, or some things you'd like to test, or you know, we'd be really happy to have that conversation with you about how you could kind of take this on maybe, and exploit what looks like quite a good market, I would say, for an awful lot of people. Yeah, I think that's me. I don't know if we want to open up for general thoughts, questions at this stage. Ollie is still muted.
Sorry.
There you are.
Yes, sorry, I agree. Just because you've just mentioned it, and to save time, I will just flick forward in the slides a couple to just flag there are some things that might be useful on the free side or the paid side, because clearly each organisation's particular situation will be different, and therefore might need something specific. but there are also broad general information available in those sources. But then I will stop sharing slides so that we can see each other a little bit easier. And